Welcome to the Holistic Psychiatry Podcast. I'm Courtney Snyder, a physician and holistic adult and child psychiatrist. Part of my work focuses on evaluating and treating those struggling with psychiatric conditions. I do this by addressing what I would consider root causes, so things like nutrient imbalances, toxicity, inflammation, trauma, chronic stress, and more. The other part of my work, however, is providing education and consultation for those seeking answers and resources. In this and upcoming episodes, I'll be including conversations. Today's conversation is with Dirk Nielandt. Dirk responded to my invitation to anyone touched by brain-related symptoms who wanted to share their story. Because he has written a book titled Chronic Healing, with his permission, I'm sharing his name. The conversation that we're having in this episode is intended for educational and informational purposes only, and not a substitute for medical advice. I do believe we all have epic tales within us that are longing to be lived out. We are all in different places in our story, though all those places and stages are valuable. Some of us currently are in what has been referred to as the dark night of the soul, where the light has yet to emerge. Some of us find ourselves on the other side of that darkness, and with more compassion, understanding, and a strong desire to help others through what we're still learning along the way. Dirk's story is one of empowerment, resilience, and possibility, a story that anyone with a chronic health condition, whether that's an autoimmune condition, a psychiatric condition, cardiovascular, or even cancer, can benefit from. Aside from inspiration, Dirk will be sharing valuable tools and insights. We'll just jump in, okay?
Yeah, sure.
I think it would be helpful to put your story in context with life before the onset of your symptoms.
Yeah, well, life was really good for me. I had a job I really enjoyed. I was a writer for television fiction, children books, pretty successful here in Belgium and Holland for the Dutch-speaking part of the world. 2 children, great children, nice marriage, just having fun and working really hard. That, I must say, I worked like 6 or 7 days a week, but enjoying it. Life was really good before symptoms.
How old were you then when you started to have symptoms?
I think I was beginning of my 50s when the first symptoms arrived, without knowing what it was. So I think it must be around 2012 that I had my first symptoms while walking. My left leg began, was a little bit sloppy and began hanging a little bit. Mm-hmm. It became more difficult to lift my leg during jogging. And so yeah. And then the doctor just said it was a hernia. Or a blocked nerve, a nerve where the entrance was too small, something like that. So it was misdiagnosed, and I just kept on going it. While over the years, the years following that, the symptoms became worse and worse. The walking became worse and worse. Couldn't keep my balance, or I didn't fall, but I had to stop and reposture my balance, refine my balance, and the leg was dragging more and more and more, and the fatigue was getting pretty unbearable, I must admit. When I look back at the final stages, the final months before the diagnosis and the months after the diagnosis, I was exhausted. I had a burnout. Mm-hmm. So that was also related to the hard working and to the chronic stress and to the MS.
MS, or multiple sclerosis, is an autoimmune condition in which the immune system is attacking the protective covering of nerve cells, and this disrupts the communication between the brain and the body.
So it took another 5 years. The definite diagnosis of MS, primary progressive MS, was in 2018. So that took quite a lot of years.
Can you explain what that means when the diagnosis of primary progressive is given?
Well, only 10 or 15% of the people diagnosed with MS are diagnosed with primary progressive MS. So it's the most rare form of MS. And the contrast with other forms of MS, you have like the relapsing remitting MS, secondary progressive MS, and the difference with the other types is that symptoms keep on getting worse and worse. And they can't tell people with primary progressive how slowly they will progress or how fast. That's a certain factor. Sure. Nobody knows. But the only certainty is that it will get worse. That's the only way to go, downwards.
Can you talk about when you were given that diagnosis and sort of then how you made sense of that or thought about your life and your future?
It was a shock. It was absolutely a shock. And I think I've been into denial for more than a year. That I didn't, I think it took me more than a year before I accepted the facts, the reality. I don't want to take it in, the reality of having a disease that would probably make me live in a wheelchair. Because that was the message of the neurologist. That was my first, after the diagnosis, the first story she told me was the chance that you're going to end up in a wheelchair is really, really, really very, very large. It can take another 10 years before it's the case, but one day it will happen. So I felt, like a victim. Actually, I felt victimized. It kind of took away all the power out of my hands, and I didn't know what to do with it. I got depressed actually afterwards for quite a while.
Was there anything hopeful that was offered, or just that it could be 10 years? That was sort of where the hope was.
That was where the hope was. There was one medicine that could lower my immunity activity, immunosuppressant medicine that could slow down the progression with approximately 30%. That was the only thing they could do for me. So I didn't know how to integrate this disease, the view of my future, what was waiting for me ahead. I couldn't integrate it into the life I had back then. So it made me totally powerless. I saw no options. Actually, life lost sense for me in a way. And I remember my wife was really shocked, but there were moments that I really said, if this is it, then I hope I'm not going to live too long anymore, because so I wouldn't commit suicide, but I had thoughts that were very dark and very and feelings that were very depressed. Yeah.
Tell me about the turning point. What shifted your thinking?
I discovered through YouTube, I think, the book, The Story of Dr. Terry Walsh, which is an American doctor who was with MS, who was in a wheelchair, who wrote a book, The Walsh Protocol, in which she promotes the lifestyle changes she made, and that that saved her from the wheelchair. So she still has MS. MS is incurable, but her symptoms disappeared, and she can live still a normal life if she keeps loyal to her lifestyle. And that's the first time that I saw some opening, some possibility that there might be a way for me to have a good life, even with the disease, if I took control myself. And it took really, it's a slow process. It's not from the moment that I read this book that it was all solved and my depression was gone. It took me really still half a year, but from Terry Walsh, I discovered other names and other possibilities, and I kept on searching, and I still am. And it's just the feeling of having control myself for 90% is what makes me, which gave me my power back and my all energy.
And in that 6 months, do you feel like there was a time when you were afraid to have that kind of hope? Because on the surface, it sounds like why wouldn't you immediately consider what she's doing and want to go that route? But I'm just wondering if, well, one, it might not have felt completely believable, but the other might have been fear of being disappointed and having that kind of hope after what you'd been through.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's certainly part of it. And also part of it was the exhaustion. I was just exhausted. I had burnouts. Mm-hmm. And that's not solved by reading a book. That's not solved in a month. By changing my diet, my gut has refound a balance, and that took almost a year. And I think that changed a lot of emotionally, physically, for the better, for the good. So it's a whole package. It's just not one book or one idea that solves it all. It's a combination of all kinds of things and time, in combination with time.
So with diet,
I lived mostly on carbs, a lot of pasta, a lot of breads, cheese. I hardly ate vegetables, very rarely. A lot of sugary stuff, a lot of processed foods. So food wasn't important to me. I just grabbed something quickly. Eating was very functional and very unimportant. I also drank a lot of wine to decompress, to de-stress. I drank too much alcohol, that's for sure. So I stopped with, I think the most important shifts were by stopping with gluten, quitting with dairy, and minimalizing sugar. I still eat some dark chocolates, but not like I used to snack sugary sweets all the day anymore. So I think those for me are the three most important changes: dairy, gluten, and sugar.
Okay. Huge. And that could impact the body in many ways, which we...
Yeah. When I, by accident, eat some gluten, the next day I immediately feel it with an overload of symptoms that come back just like that. So certain gluten is certain for me. And I've read in more sources that gluten for people with autoimmune diseases should be avoided.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, for everyone. So and that was very clear. Yeah.
So even that choice to have gluten, you sort of know what that's going to look like. That makes it easier to resist.
I found the diet now, which I enjoy. So I don't mind anymore. I'm not jealous anymore about people having a good piece of nice bread or cheese. So that doesn't matter anymore.
So what was the next tool for you that you found especially helpful?
Yeah, yoga. Yeah, movement, through yoga. Yeah, because the yoga teacher, I follow the Iyengar tradition of yoga, which is a very precise way with a lot of props they use. So all the asanas, the movements in yoga that have to do with balance, they have to be adapted for me. I have to I need a wall to hold myself, or a rope, or a chair, or something. And this yoga teacher really understood the needs for my body, so she made it possible for me to really do intensive yoga, and I really enjoyed it. Because it took me inwards into my body. It's not competitive. It's a sort of meditation while moving. So I really, and still it's my the thing I enjoy most, actually.
A lot of people that have chronic health conditions, not only were they not in touch with their body, but then they became in opposition with their body when it wasn't functioning in the way that they wanted it to. And so I'm just imagining in yoga, for you, it's also been, as you describe, finding a way that sort of honors where your body's at, exactly where it's at, and I just think that's important, even with our aging. That's important because people can often become more and more at odds with their body when it's an opportunity to be finally learning to honor our body exactly where it is in the present.
Yeah, and be gentle with yourself, with your body, with what you can and what you can't. Yeah, that was an important lesson too, which yoga taught me, actually.
What was the next step after yoga? And not that these things are falling off; these are things that you're layering into your life.
Yes, I think meditation and spirituality, which was a non-existent topic in my life before. I was an atheist with the belief that there is no life after death, that there is nothing, no higher powers. So I was very anti-woo everything. And I find a lot of meaning now in spiritual topics, when they are grounded. Just like, well, Gabor Mate is a good example. He's a very spiritual man. But he's also scientific, which I find a really good combination.
Dr. Gabor Mate is a Hungarian-Canadian physician and author who has a background in family practice. His speaking and writing focus on the potential lifelong impacts of trauma in early childhood development on both physical and mental health, including autoimmune disease, cancer, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, addictions, and a range of other health conditions.
I think meditation and spirituality were really the most important discoveries that I'm still making. I'm still in the process of discovering that whole area. Yeah.
Speak more about how his work has been impactful in your healing, but also how you've integrated what you've learned from him into your own story.
Yeah, I think his tool of compassionate inquiry is something that I learned from him, also through my therapist, my psychotherapist, because I also started psychotherapy pretty quickly after the diagnosis. Okay. So it helped me he helped me, Gabor Mate, and his teaching to see the trauma and how my early trauma really defined me for a long time, and how to break that chain from old trauma. And I don't think I'm completely free from it, and that's not necessary neither. But I'm more aware of it now, which I wasn't at all. There is some awareness around old trauma, and instead of pushing it away and not wanting to have anything to do with it, embracing is perhaps too powerful to say as a word, but it has something. Well, it's in that direction. It's embracing the trauma, because it's part of who I am.
Right, and I think that allows us to recognize that we're not currently in the traumatic situation.
Yeah, exactly. It's past. It's past. It's over. Mm-hmm. It's not absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly what he teaches. The past is the past, and instead of reacting from that old trauma that's in the past, just recognizing it, and then realizing it's over. It's not necessary to react anymore from that past trauma.
Right, and with that, knowing it's part of our physiology to a point, and which is exactly why things like yoga and things like spirituality can help counter some of that, and accessing the vagus nerve, which I would say both of those do. Can you talk about, for you, what trauma means? Because I think people have a different understanding in how early we can experience trauma. But for you, when you use the word trauma, what does that mean?
For me, what does trauma means? Well, I think that's a good question, difficult question. What does it mean for me? I think the trauma that was, of course, from 7 years on, when I was aware of my mother and my father and how I was raised, it's clear where the trouble was with my mother, where the difficulties were. But the years that I wasn't aware of it, that I have no conscious memory of, from the womb, when my mother was pregnant of me, until 5-6 years, a lot of stuff happens that causes, that made me as a young child that created fears in myself and reactions, how to coping mechanisms with those fears and those experiences that were traumatic. Without I didn't come from an abusive family. I came from a very intellectual, very cerebral family, where everything was rational and emotions didn't exist. I was never hugged. But my parents were very, very caring. But still, there were, from early childhood, stuff that I really missed, that I didn't receive from my caretakers. And that formed me. And that's the trauma that I revisited during psychotherapy, and that helped me to gain insights in how I react and respond and why I am who I am.
Right. And I think you felt through therapy safe enough to sort of acknowledge that, because I think people are afraid that if they acknowledge those parts about their family system, that then they're not being loyal, or they're suggesting that there weren't things positive in there. Everything becomes black and white. And then there's a missed opportunity, especially when there's not, as you mentioned, not overt abuse. Then people, it's, I think, harder for them to put their finger on what needs weren't being met. And that doesn't mean your parents had their own childhood and their own experience. So I think people are sort of afraid to go there, and it gets in the way of their healing. But it sounds like for you, both psychotherapy and then Dr. Mate's work allowed you to do that.
Yeah. And it's a process. It's still going on. It's not like it's a finished process and it's all solved and it's all finished now. It keeps on going. It's a journey. And the cliches, enjoy the journey. But it's true actually, because it's quite exciting to discover all the areas in me that I wasn't aware of, that I never cared about. So it's also a lot of fun actually. It's part of the fun, discovering new things,
Right.
New pathways to healing. I think for me, which was also really very essential in my whole process of healing, was stress reduction. Which is related to the vagus nerve also, of course. I lived under chronic stress for like 30, 40 years, probably all my life. And the stress management, working less, working on a different level, on a different way, is really essential, I think, for keeping health or healing. And is also not a topic which a doctor, he doesn't talk about it or she doesn't talk about it at all, which is weird, because I think so many diseases are caused by chronic stress.
I think a lot of people think of it as something else to do. Like, I need to add yoga in, I need to meditate. Where am I going to find time in my day? And not appreciating what you just described is that a lot of stress reduction is clearing things out of your life that are just too much, kind of like clutter around us.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a total mental. You have to really make a mental shift.
What have we not talked about that's especially important or meaningful?
Someone who's also important is Kelly Turner, Dr. Kelly Turner. She's an American psychologist who wrote 2 books, Radical Remission, and her second book is an update from Radical Remission, Radical Hope. And she researched cancer patients who went into remission, and she discovered 10 factors that all those people that went into remission had in common.
These included exercise, spiritual connection, empowering yourself, increased positive emotions, following your intuition, so listening to yourself, releasing suppressed emotions, changing your diet, herbs and supplements, having a strong reason for living, and increasing social support.
And I think that's also very important for all people with chronic diseases, not only with cancer. I think it works for all of them.
Right.
And you can do more than those 10, of course, but those 10 factors that she discovered or she recognized in those people are the 10 that everyone of the people in remission did. So a lot of people did like 20 or 30 changes in their life, but those 10 was really some things that all the people without any exception changed in their life.
I want to mention your book.
Yes.
And the title is Chronic Healing, which is exactly what you're talking about. Just the title alone speaks volumes, because for anyone who's had a chronic health condition, it's not you fix it and then you get to the other side. It's really a chronic healing, which can be both maintaining health, but in some cases, we find that there's more and more health to be gained that we never even knew before the health condition.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What is different from your prior health?
Well, what it different is that I'm an important thing is that I'm much more in contact with my body. I'm much more aware of my body. I lived in my head for like the most part of my life. I was a writer. I was sitting all day, almost always intellectually busy, but my body I completely ignored. I couldn't care less. I didn't move. I hardly did any sports. So what has changed? I don't know if I'm giving an answer to your question, but basically what has changed is the meaning making in my life. I have found different meanings now in my life. Before it was all about success and making money and being successful in the world outside, and it was fun. I still envy sometimes the old me, but I also find the new me who is who has who's not so much involved anymore in worldly success and stuff like that. And I find different meanings now, and that's also very, very valuable. And I'm also grateful for that opportunity. So in a way, I find things to be grateful now for the disease, which
Right.
I hear myself saying that, it feels a little bit strange, but it's true actually. There are, yeah.
I'm always hoping that people can appreciate and hold on to the meaning and the choice to just sort of look at our suffering and trust that there's something that we're learning, that we're gaining, and now for you being on the other side of that, you can attest to that it sounds like you experience gratitude, you're in touch with your body and more integrated.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I was just thinking how judgmental I was. My life, the way I thought I was, I divided the world into winners and losers, and people who were sick were losers and it was unconscious. I wouldn't have said it out loud, something like that, but unconsciously, that was a belief system I had. And now I feel I can say with certainty that my heart is much more open. I'm less judgmental. I'm much more in contact with people, and which is so much fun to have real connection, which was really a strange thing for me. I was never in connection with people except with my children and my wife and some friends, but even then. So yeah, it has enriched my life, absolutely.
I think what you have to share, as you already know, is so valuable, and you share it with warmth and wisdom. Lovely for people that are suffering and needing encouragement.
And now the book is since October on the market, and it's which is exciting, and the reactions are great. So
oh, that's great.
But unfortunately, it's not translated into English yet. It's only in Dutch for the moment.
If you would like to help get Dirk's book published in English, please consider sharing, liking, or commenting. If you have been touched by brain-related symptoms and would like to share your story or part of your story, please contact me through my website, CourtneySnyderMD.com. Except for conversations I have with professionals or public figures, I will not be using actual names. On my website, you're also welcome to subscribe. I'm on Facebook and Instagram as well as YouTube. I look forward to connecting with you in a future podcast or perhaps even a conversation on this podcast. Until then, take care.